All right. All right. Yay. Okay, we're in business. All right. So tell me how things are going. What strategies have you all tried? Has anybody jumped off the deep end yet with centers? What's going on? Fill me in.
So we bought all your books for all of our middle school teachers, and the person most excited is our 8th grade global studies teacher, and he's using just like crazy. And the 8th grade teachers are actually doing centers. They're doing a vocabulary, a writing, um, a reading, and then they're doing some grammar. So I'm kind of trying to get the 6th and 7th grade teachers to go visit the 8th grade classes to see how they're doing it.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like we've got a good start.
So Kelly, are you the instructional coach there? Tell me again what your role is.
So I'm just like title lead teacher, which is my
Okay.
first year because we've only had like two of staff doing that. So now we have four, and we also have a multi-language learner teacher. So we're all supporting.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so we've really expanded a lot.
Okay, cool. So what would they, so the ones who started the centers, if you know, um, what um what are some of their challenges? Are they, talking about what I mean, like what are they noticing? What are some of the challenges they might have?
So, our global studies teacher, his articles are too long. So I told them that they could, instead of going all four centers every single day, that
Mm-hmm.
maybe they could split it instead of trying to do 15 minutes in each place because they're not getting it all done.
Mm-hmm.
I told him you could do that strategy, or I think what he's doing is like now that they're used to it, they're going to read on their own and try to annotate and
Mm-hmm.
come up with those words that they don't know, like what you told us about the sticky notes. So I gave them
Yeah.
that idea. And then on day two, actually then kind of talk about it. And I think another challenge is you've got two centers going on in each room, and the kids are pretty quiet, but you still hear the other teachers talking and directing those students. So we wish
Mm-hmm.
that we could be in separate rooms, but our building's small and, we do the best that we could do.
Yeah, and the thing is that the kids really adapt to it. I think it bothers us more than it does the kids. So I was in a classroom yesterday. Yesterday was Monday. Yesterday, and I was sitting with one group, and this social studies teacher, he's just one of those people where his normal, like if he whispers, it sounds like he's presenting to 100 people. It's just the way he is. And I'm sitting next to him, and I was having a really hard time focusing, but the kids were just like, it didn't bother them at all. And I think that is very true, so, and they do get used to it. So would you say at this point that they're starting to get in those routines, as far as annotation and just working in centers?
I've been in there, I'm mostly in 6th grade, but I visited 3 times, and I feel like it is going in the right direction, and at
Yeah.
least the 8th graders, maybe because 'cause they're a little bit more mature, they're doing pretty well with it, and the other thing is our teachers are rotating, not our
Uh,
students. We'd love to have them get up and walk around, but we just don't have the minutes to do it. So the teachers are taking their materials and rotating,
okay.
which
Okay.
is saving a little bit of time.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. And they'll probably start seeing the effect too, that they're going to be able to cover more in less time, because it's literally bell to bell instruction. So they'll probably start seeing that change. Are there any challenges that they're having?
I think the challenges are coming more from the teachers than the students.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then what's kind of there, I always ask this, that once they get started, I'm like, what do you notice about your kids? And are you getting any feedback from them about what they're noticing about the kids and these structures?
No, but, I'm gonna go back tomorrow and ask.
Yeah.
I'm not normally in there, and usually
Mhm.
when I do get in there and I've had those kids, they're always like, "Mrs. Cito, Mrs. Cito." They're
Mhm.
pretty well focused on what they're doing. So
Yeah.
as crazy as it looks maybe from the outside, I feel like they're all on task, and when I've just walked around to try to help out, I don't know, I feel like they're doing pretty well. So we did a diagnostic at the beginning of the year on IXL and Study Island, and um, overall, most of our kids have grown a little bit.
Hmm.
So we're going to do our winter NWEA. So we're really looking forward to see those
Yeah, that's
scores.
going to be the big one.
So
So
we're
yeah.
hoping, yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so when we meet in February, you'll have the 411 on that. So,
yeah.
okay, so thank you for, being the first one out there and sharing so much, and just really helping to set the tone too. So thank you for that, Kelly. And how about the rest of you? How are things going? What things have you tried out? What questions do you have? What challenges are you seeing right now?
I don't mind going.
Thanks, Stephanie.
Sorry, I have somebody in my classroom, so I'm trying to like maneuver locations. But I just kind of they started a little bit more simpler because of I push into classes and I work with like about 80 teachers, so it's kind of crazy. But what I saw and what I see significantly is that teachers are spending 90, like I would say 8% of the time in the class talking, and
Mm-hmm.
there's literally no feedback from students. And that's like a big issue that we have, especially at the middle school. So something I've been doing during staff training at like the sticky notes idea,
Mm-hmm.
and like just literally almost everything that we had covered, I've tried and given these little tidbits here and there. And some teachers who reach out more, I've given them extra, techniques and things like that. But, everybody seems very open to change, but it's also kind of, I don't want to ever tell somebody like what you're doing isn't right. So it's
Right,
I'm trying to implement it slowly, if
right.
that makes sense. But no, everyone's been pretty good. I used humor. I used a lot of your humor and they loved it. They loved the wine, or the bagpipes.
Oh, yeah,
Um
yeah.
oh, they thought that was funny. So I kind of started off with that. But just to break the ice and things like that. But it's been going well overall.
Yay. Okay. And then what are they noticing about the kids as they started implementing these strategies and instructional approaches? What are they noticing about the kids?
Well, one teacher, a science teacher at the high school level specifically she said, I'm always afraid to give the kids the reins because she's afraid to lose control.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, but it's so great to hear their voices and them talking to each other. And obviously, sometimes they're off task, but
Sure.
she was saying that, and I told her that's something that I think everyone struggles with, having the kids, be able to take control of their learning as well. But we also have to see what they know, and this is the way
Mm-hmm.
we're going to do it.
Cool. Okay. All right. Great. So again, once we get into like when we meet again in February, I'm going to ask you like what kind of growth you're seeing with the kids, and what are like some of you will have NWEA data and things like that, like what are we seeing as far as growth and changes along those lines because that's always the bottom line, right? Um who else would like to chime in here? How are things going in your school and your classrooms? And those of you who just logged on, I'm going to put it here again. If you didn't sign in, please go to that sign in sheet and sign in, so you get your credit for today. And if you're able to put your camera on, would you please put your camera on, so I can see everybody? So who else? Like what else have you tried and implemented, and what are you noticing?
I jumped right in with all of them. So
Uh-huh.
my favorite has always been sticky notes. So I did that and the gist. And I felt like the kids, I don't know how to explain, maybe they internalized the article more or they
Mm-hmm.
felt more importance than just like, here's a list of questions. And so they really did a good job trying to find those words or the phrase or things like that. And then the one where I did the gist like in 20 words, that one
Mm-hmm.
was great. And it was so neat to go around the room and hear everybody's different ones, but yet the same. So we
Mm-hmm.
all really enjoyed that one. And then I did work on my eighth graders were my guinea pigs to try the centers. And they were so excited to because I try to do so many different things all the time. So they're like, yes, something new.
Uh-huh.
Uh, I feel like it's not something that I could do all the time with him because it would be like, now it's time to goof off. But just sporadically doing those, uh,
Mm-hmm.
I liked it. And they did too. I tried to make all of them revolve around what I do poetry this time. So do you find that it's easier to have all of them around one concept or different ideas? is my question.
Yeah, not to sound like a cop out, it depends, you know.
Mhm.
So, you know, I've been in classrooms, especially in world languages, where I'll go in and they're working on vocabulary and it's 5 different vocabulary centers.
Okay.
Or
Mhm.
I'll go into a science class and they're all looking at microscopes, but each station or center has a different
Objective to it.
yeah, exactly. So it really depends. And then I've been in other classrooms. Classroom I was in yesterday, the U.S. history teacher, what he was doing was he basically had 2 days planned. So he had 8 centers. So when I first looked at it, I'm watching before I like leapt in and joined a center with some kids. I'm like, does he have 8 centers or is it 2 groups of 4 where where there's carbon copies? And what he did was that he had 8 centers, but he knew they weren't going to get through it in one day, so it was over 2 days.
Mhm. I
And
did 7 in 3 days.
yeah, yeah, and so he did it that way, and he had like one was it was a social studies class, so they watched CNN 10. So CNN 10, it was different content, but they did it on, there were 2 of them. And then
Mhm.
he had a CER station writing, and then there was an infographic. They were looking at the Civil War, North and South, and the big question that they had was who has the greater advantage, the North or the South? Um, and then, how did this impact, the timeline for the war? And
Mhm.
so that's what they kept addressing. So they had different things, that's my point. And there were 8 stations. So they did 4 on one day and then they were doing the other 4 today
Okay.
with that. So Roxanne, not to sound like like I'm evading the question, it really does depend on what you're doing. And then there's other classrooms that I've been in where if kids are working on a research project, like they have a research station like every single day, and the kids are working on the research project at that station, and
Okay.
and
Yeah,
that's
because I
just
had
something
him
that they're
visit the
doing at that time.
fluency one every
Mhm.
day. So we were building the fluency over a couple of days. But like I said, it all went around poetry. So I just want to kind of guide next time. Does it all have to be focused around one unit or topic? Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah, yep, absolutely. Who else? Like, how are things going?
Good. We tried out the exactly like 20 word uh of the like summary thing, and it
Yep.
was so
Hmm.
funny how many kids were like, so like does it have to be a max of 20 or a minimum of 20? I'm like, no, exactly 20.
Yeah.
And it was
Yeah.
just mind-boggling to them. And the one's like, I'm gonna need my calculator. I was,
Oh my gosh. Oh
okay,
man. All right. Yes, we're
if you
doing
need that to
math
help you.
and
But
ELA.
they really enjoyed it. But we started small. Like I had them just do a summary of like their break first, like their Thanksgiving break and things they enjoyed, that kind of thing, to do it. So it was something they were comfortable with. And then
Mm-hmm.
moving into then the actual reading passages and things like that. So
Okay. All right. And then so just was super successful. Um uh did the kids so my experience has been like when they do gist and they're trying to craft that, the summary that's exactly 20 words, they have to keep going back. And did you notice that in like debates about what you keep in, what you leave out?
yes,
Yay.
yeah. 'Cause they were like, oh, well, I have like 25. I'm like, okay, then take out the unimportant stuff. And then see if you can reword things to figure out what it was the most important that you want to tell me about. What was the big things that you did? Take out little information. And some of my especially some of my boys who don't like to write very much at all were like, well, I only got 12 words. I'm like, okay, give me more info, give me more details.
It
What
has
else
to
is
be 20. Yeah, you're
yeah.
not done. It has to be 20. Yeah.
Yeah, that was
And
good.
and and it's like the weirdest thing too, because, I could say, "Oh, write a summary," or just write a summary. But for some reason, as soon as you put that variable on there, that requirement, it like gamifies everything, and then they get kind of competitive about it, and it's like a puzzle they've got to solve. And it's the craziest thing when I've used that strategy in classrooms, how that works. So what else? Have you tried centers or anything yet? Have you jumped off that cliff?
Me personally or
Yeah, you
everybody?
personally or just everybody? Yeah. Let's
um
we won't just put you on the spot, Kelsey.
I have not.
Okay, cool. All right. Um, who else? Like, what have you been working on? Just seems to be the popular strategy.
I implemented the sticky notes.
Mm-hmm.
My intervention group, we were reading novels and we were reading Hatchet. And so I gave them a journal and the sticky notes so that they could start to have to think deeper while they were reading. And it was really good because there were kids that made connections to the pilot having a heart attack because their grandparent had had a heart attack.
Mm-hmm.
And just the comments and thoughts, they're like, I wonder when the hatchet's going to come into the story because that's the title of the story and things like that. So my goal is to eventually, when we come back from winter break, to move away from the sticky notes and do it just in the journal.
Yeah, you might try that 2-column one of like what I know and what I think, and start branching them into that, because that's kind of the next level. So
yeah.
Cool. All right, yay. All right, Chrissy, thank you. And who else like to chime in here? Great discussion. I'm very excited.
I will.
Yay!
So I kind of dove in with both feet and have been doing a lot. We did sticky notes, which they love, and it's been really cool because they're taking it outside of my classroom. They're asking me to
Ooh.
give them sticky notes to take into their other content areas, which is pretty awesome. And I teach science, and I also am a reading coach, but I've got a teaching partner that's been teaching for years, and he's jumped on the bandwagon, and he's been doing some sticky notes, a little bit more of letting them. So we've both been doing stations, which has been super cool. And then kind of the dissecting the sentences that you talked about, because our reading, our science text is so complex. I think my biggest challenge, we've been doing some PLC groups at school, and my principal's been putting me with different groups and trying to have me show them or encourage them to do some more reading instruction. I'm still getting that I'm a science teacher, it's not my job. I'm a social studies teacher, no, not my job. So that's been a big challenge in trying to kind of shift that a little bit, but I am intrigued to see what our 6th grade scores are, because I've got science teachers up here doing it. I've got social studies, one of the two that have jumped on board, and reading and language, we're off for it. So I'm excited to see like what do our scores come out like.
Yeah.
We've been doing a lot. I haven't tried the gist yet, but maybe that's next. We'll see.
Okay, cool. All right. So a lot of progress, and look at you, creating all kinds of influence in your building there.
It's
That's
been
very
fun.
cool. That's very cool. Okay, who else? How are things going? Messages from the home offices. And I just put a file in there. Actually, it's in the orange book. So I know you guys all have copies of it, but I just pulled it out there because as you were talking, Christina, about complex sentences, and especially in like science-based text, that strategy, break it up, is really good. I was doing a different webinar this morning, and somebody asked about that strategy. So I had it like right there on the desktop. So so it's in a PDF form. So if you want to share that with any of your colleagues, feel free to do that. For those of you signed in after I posted it, please make sure that you sign in. So that Google Sheet, just sign in there. Okay, now since sticky notes is such a popular strategy that's really resonating, I want to show you guys. Oh shoot, it's over here. Okay, hang on one second. Let me find where I'm going. I forgot that was Google Slides today. So give me one hot minute. Because I want to show you something like how you can adapt sticky notes to like your different content areas. So it's always like question, comment, connection. But if you have a protocol that you want to follow for your different content areas, I want to show you how you can adapt it. So this is the webinar I was doing earlier today, but I want to show you this adaptation. There we go. Okay, so oop, there we go. Letting somebody in. There we go. Yeah, I never use Google Slides. So I'm always like, where is everything? All right. So can you guys see? Yep. Okay. For some reason it says screen sharing is paused. I don't know why. All right. So this is Dangerous Pie is a YA novel. And so imagine that you're all ELA teachers for just a moment, okay? And I'm teaching about indirect and direct characterization. And so I'm going to do like a little brief mini lesson as to, the literary device and how it works. So actions, effects, looks, and speech. So we learn about a character by what they do, the effect that they have on other characters, what they look like physically, and the things that they kind of say. So as I read this text, every time I find something that reveals an aspect about this character, like their actions, their effects that they have on others, their looks, and their speech, I'm going to put it on a sticky and I'm going to put it in there. So you see how you can start like general, like with your comments, questions, comments, connections, but then you can get it specific. So if I was a history teacher, I might put in there variables that that impact the time or the place, or in science class too, I might look at that as well, like what the effect is or what the impact is, or even like inquiry, what's the big question? What does the data reveal? So whatever kind of protocols that you might have, you can adapt the sticky notes and then use that as on a more micro level, more of a strategic, like kind of myopic view of the text, because there's always so much going on in these texts, but how can we like zero in and then have it align with maybe some kind of content area aspect that we want to explore. So I'd set it up like that, and then I'd model it for the kids. So same thing, I'd read it out loud to the kids. And then each time I find an example, so here's an example like speech. So here's the character asking questions. They use informal speech. What does that reveal to me about the character? So I'm making an assertion, following up with evidence. And then I'm also getting on an inferential level. It's not just what the character says, but what's like the deeper meaning, what's between the lines on that. And then here's another example too. This is actions, an example of actions. They're observing others. They're annoyed with other people. And then, just the action of this character, for example, where they cover up their list. What does that tell you about the character? The author doesn't state it directly, but what can you infer, or what does that suggest? If you're covering something up, why are you doing that? And so again, it's just like, it's like an onion, and you just keep peeling the layers, to get to the core, to get to the deeper meaning, the meat of what the text is about. So I just want to kind of give you an example of that. And what I would do then is just say, remember, indirect characterization is a lot of showing, not exactly telling. Telling would be the direct characterization, but an indirect characterization, there's more of a subtext to it. Now that I've done it and I've given you an example, now you're going to continue to read and do the same thing. Every time you find examples of speech, actions, their effect on others, you're going to write that down. You're going to put it in the sticky note and for your text. And so yeah, so can you guys think of like other ways that you would oh, was it on pause, or was it not working? Did you guys see all of that?
It didn't seem like it changed, like you had it there.
Oh,
But
okay, let me show you again.
yeah,
I bet none of you have had issues with technology, especially in the last 3 years. Okay, let's see what's going on here. Why is it saying it's on pause? Okay, hang on. Okay, can you see it now? Yes, no? Okay, great. So this was the first page I had. Did you guys see that? Okay. So, and then this was the second page. Okay. You didn't see that before? Yeah. So it's just, oh, you're not seeing it now? Oh, okay. Like what? Okay. So, and then, so there's an example with the actions and then just bringing them back, you know, to what indirect characterization does. Okay. All right. Yay. So, can you think of, I'm just being selfish. Can you think of things in your content area that you might use, you know, like a definition or a lens that you have to use? Like I'm thinking, you know, for instance, in like science, where are my science folks? Where are the science folks today? All right. Yay, science folks. And you have like a red tree or something, or pink. It's pink back there. Can you guys think of something like if maybe I was looking at like independent and dependent you know, like I'm trying to think of like the science terminology, but I'm like looking at ecosystems, like different kinds of variables. Like, would that be something? Not to put you guys on the spot, but I am. Oh, I can't hear you. I think you guys are on mute. Or maybe you're just not talking. I don't know.
So to kind of put it in science terms, instead of the actions, as they're reading the text, maybe some of those like control variables, is that what you're talking about? Like
Yeah.
control or possibly as one of the authors? I'm not sure.
So tell me, like, what are you guys studying right now?
We're just starting geology right now.
Okay.
So into different rocks.
Different rocks. Okay. My grandson, I got him a rock advent calendar, and you would have thought I gave him like a nugget of gold. He's having like
Absolutely.
the best time with it. Yeah, he's a little rock nerd. And so and he's in middle school too, so it's right up his alley. Yeah, and I'm trying to think too of like something that you would look at that you're doing like an analysis, like if it was describing something and you had a protocol like in science or scientific inquiry that you had to go through the lens, especially if they were reading something like, you know, what's the question or what's the problem? What were the impacts, or like cause and effect? That would probably be a lot, especially in geology and looking at plate tectonics and things like that. So, so if you guys come up with something, because I want to think of some other examples other than just that ELA example, because I just kind of started exploring that of just like, here's the macro level of the sticky notes, and this is how I can get it like more micro and content specific. I would love to hear what you had to say, because I'm trying to think of like more examples. I've got it for social studies, like sourcing a primary source document. When was it written? Why was it written? Who was it written for? What was its impact? That we could do it that way. But I'm kind of stumped right now on science. Yeah. So, okay. All right. So let's go into the meat of the presentation today, or the basically our class, our meeting today. And let me share my screen again. Here we go. Okay, so just a reminder, all of our handouts are here, and one-stop shopping. So I'll give you a second to get that, or if you need to. Did you guys already get the handouts? Okay, all right, so I'm going to go ahead and skip that. Okay, and there's the login, because that's like the most important thing. All right, so we pretty much did that, you know, like questions that you have and classroom practices, and we have the luxury of having a smaller group. So, you know, if you have questions, things like that, just put them in the chat, and I'll pause along the way and check that, and or just turn your microphone and just chime in. You're not interrupting. It's not rude. We're having a discussion. And then let's review those components for the development of reading comprehension, and you know, additional strategies. And then I want to go into like classroom organization and centers. Some of you have started it, but that's like kind of the next push, because what we know about adolescent reading comprehension, that's like the why, right? So, but how do you make all of that occur? And using centers, stations, rotations is just one way to have an instructional design in order to make that happen and providing that context. So we're going to get into that as well. And we are going to take like a 5-minute stretch break too at one point. Okay, so we've talked about this, about science of reading. Just a reminder too, we are concerned primarily up here. Background knowledge, vocabulary, language structures, verbal reasoning, and literacy knowledge. Just an FYI, too, if folks are looking for things in that foundational reading, like the phonological awareness, decoding and such, think Circa, and I'll put them in the chat, has just developed a foundational reading program that gets into the linguistic elements of reading that's designed for middle school. So it's age agnostic. So a lot of times what happens is these kinds of programs that we have to use for middle school are seen as kind of babyish. And this kind of takes a different approach, a more mature approach, when kids don't have those decoding. And then here's the best thing about it is that it doesn't require more prep on the teacher's part. So it's really all done online. And also the teacher doesn't need a reading degree in order to be able to use it, which is really key. So I'll put that in the chat area, so if you're interested. So just a reminder too, some would argue there's 4, some would say that there's 5 levels of comprehension. I like to make things simple. So we have literal, inferential, and evaluative. Literal is that right there, I can skim the page, probably get the information and just plug it in. Inferential is that between the lines, subtext, if you will. And the evaluative are those big like questions, like the reader needs to consider beyond the text and use the text in order to consider a response. So, and those tend to be essential questions and not easily answered. And remember that we want to be primarily up in that inferential and evaluative place, particularly evaluative. And so that's my question for all of you about questioning, because we talked about it again back in September. What have you noticed about questioning and with your students? Are you guys keeping track of it? What are you noticing at this point? And you can just go ahead and put in chat if you want, or just turn off your mic.
We just kind of wrapped up a forces in motion unit.
Mhm.
So it's pretty, so it's tough to just get the literal stuff for some of that because some of the concepts are a little bit not very kind of abstract.
Mhm.
But it was neat when we could go from that literal to the inferential when they can see it in their everyday lives and kind of draw that in. But reading it is really difficult. We are also piloting a program too for forces in motion. So it was difficult to pull in like a new curriculum and go to some of these higher levels without feeling really comfortable with the text. But
Yeah.
sometimes literal is hard enough for some of
Yeah,
the
and
kids to do.
physics, yeah. Mhm.
It's like, acceleration and velocities and things like that. But it really is fun when you can tie it into their everyday life and they can get a little bit higher in their thinking questions.
Mhm. What if I know a lot of uh, science teachers do these kinds of things, especially with physics, because exactly what you're saying, it's like, okay, there's a force here, but you can't see it. So it's very hard, especially for younger middle school kids, like 6th graders, because they're still in that concrete operational phase in Piaget. They haven't really, their brains are not, quite there. They're kind of going through the process of hardwiring into abstract and more metaphorical, which is necessary for subjects like physics and algebra. And so they'll do something like they'll give a scenario, like, Sisyphus is allowing the rock to roll down the hill, and such is there. What will happen, and how do you know? You probably already have things like that, right?
Sure, yeah, it's and some are a little bit more comfortable with it than others. Some of
Mm-hmm.
you know able to handle the abstract better than others. So you're dealing with lots of different individual brains. Yeah,
Yeah, and they're all over the place on that developmental,
right.
keyboard too, right? So, yeah, I mean, those are the kinds of things too, that it's not just knowing, oh, F equals ma, or, the rate of acceleration is this, or the, gravitational pull is, 9.8 meters per second or something like that. But it's like, why does that matter? So if I drop a feather or a rock from a 5-story building, which will hit first, and of course the answer is they both hit at the same time, right? So, of course, I know there's other factors too, because the feather will float and things like that. There's other things that happen, but in theory, both of them should hit at the same time. And so why is that? So those are the kinds of questions that we want to get, not just, yes, no, or whatever. But I'm sure you guys are already doing that, and it's probably in that program, right?
Yes, but just reading the textbook is tough. So we're
Mhm.
piloting the program and it's digital. And so I had even a hard time with like the sticky note concept because everything is digital and trying
Yeah.
to figure out how to do that was kind of difficult to do.
So you know what might work a little bit better is that 2-column organizer where they just kind of have like a reading notebook or whatever you want to call it, and then what I know and what I'm thinking. So when they read through, they can just write down those details of what I'm thinking and then what do I know. So that might be more conducive than because it's all online as opposed to the print.
Sure, yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
And we're still kind of hunting on our curriculum. So the decisions we make now will affect us for years to come. So
Yeah,
we
yeah,
have to
yeah.
make those decisions.
It may be another 10 years before, yeah. Hmm. Okay, all right. I get that. I hear that. Okay. So, so again, that questioning and we want to make sure that we're on those high levels. So, as we look at our questions, making sure that we're really spending that majority of time up there. Do kids need to know those basic concepts like we were sharing, like in physics? Yeah, absolutely. But it should be leading towards application, application, application. So, okay. So, reminders too. Higher level questions, essential questions, grade level and above. That's my next question. How is that going for you guys with grade level texts and above? Because there's such a range. Everybody's on that as far as like grade level text at instructional level? Okay. So one of my schools that I'm working with in Wisconsin, Beyond the Cheese Curtain, they are they just the ELA teachers just adopted Amplify, and so the texts are long and they're grade level and above. And so, the first quarter was kind of rough for them because they're also figuring out the digital platform and then also getting the kids used to these texts. So yesterday I met with them and the social studies teachers too. And the social studies teachers don't have a textbook and or any kind of materials. They're making up their own all the time. And I thought it was really important for them to see what the kids were doing in ELA at this point. And the ELA teachers now have a quarter under their belt, with the new program with Amplify. And uh, so we were sharing with them some of the texts, and a good number of faculty were like, "Whoa, you guys are doing that now," because a lot of the kids were still getting like shortened paragraphs and things in their other subject areas. And then all of a sudden, ELA is giving them like these longer articles and longer texts to read. And it was a real eye opener because I think we've just gotten in this habit of quote unquote differentiating text that the kids can quote unquote handle, but they should struggle some with those instructional texts that we give them. And so let's just make sure that we keep ratcheting it up. And I want to caution you too about some platforms that are out there that are generally one pagers, and then they'll adapt to the reading level. Be careful of those, because another big thing that we're working towards is building that stamina and executive function. And we need larger texts, more complex texts. There needs to be some meat on the bone in order to develop those skill sets. So building that executive functioning and summarization, and you guys are just leaping right in there. Obviously round robin reading, and then just like one pagers with multiple choice questions and those lower level materials. What about independent reading? What should they be reading? It's kind of a trick question.
Independent level?
Yeah. Yeah, which may be different than their, than grade level, right? So if I
Right.
have a sixth grader whose independent reading level is at fourth grade and they choose a book that's about that level, that's fine. But instructional level, sitting in class and working on texts together, they're going to be in that sixth grade, right? So, okay, thank you. Thank you. I don't know who chimed in, but thank you. Not leaving me hanging. Okay. All right. So let's dig into some vocabulary, some more into vocabulary. And the worst way, as we know, to develop vocabulary is to give kids a really long list of words, like 40 words, and give them the definition. So I was in a history class about 2 weeks ago, and the kids were given, 30 terms with the definitions, and they were told to memorize them. And that didn't work well. And this teacher has been doing this for years, and very frustrated. Then I was in another class, it was the same content, and it was the same thing of, I want you to skim the text first. What words don't you know? What words do you need to know? And then in their discussion questions, those words came up again. And so I was joking with the teacher, because I was working with the kids on the discussion questions. And I said, well, everybody knows what a dwelling is now, because they got hit with it like 3 or 4 times. And everybody knows what that is, as opposed to just giving you the definition. So here's my question. Have any of you done that, where you have them skim the text first and look for vocabulary or words that they may not know? Have any of you done that yet?
Yes.
Okay. What are you noticing with the kids? Anybody have any surprises on there? Like, you don't know that? Like,
I feel like a lot of mine are coming up with essentially the same list of words that they don't know.
Yeah, that you would give them. And of course, the difference is that they're creating the list, right?
Right.
And it's the same thing with like questions. When they get involved in the questions, I find that they're about like 95% aligned with what I would ask. And then there might be some surprises on there. But again, this other class that I was in, tapestry, like, it seems like nobody knows, kids don't know what that is at all, a tapestry in the 21st century, because that's not the first sixth grade classroom that's happened to me, where kids don't know what a tapestry is. And so I'm always surprised by that too. But that's the most effective way to really develop vocabulary. And then, as we were talking about, I don't know, the sentence was something like it, because it was a townsperson's perspective from the Middle Ages, and it was something like, it was advantageous that the townspeople practice their craft at their dwelling. And so, I said to the kids, I'm like, so what is that? Like, what's going on? So we got dwelling was like your home. And I said, well, what's your craft? And of course, they're thinking of like Hobby Lobby. And I'm like, well, okay, it's usually work or something like that. And then one student perked up and said, oh, they work from home. And I said, exactly. It's like the original work from home, so you have your shop, and then you also have like where you live too. So, and then we went into like other words too, and it was just part of that discussion. And then they were able to answer that question. So this is one of my favorite little handy dandy strategies. I don't think I shared this one with you guys, did I? Vocabulary paint chips. Okay, so let me unplug my headphones here. So I'm going to show you a quickie little video. And basically what you do is you take paint chips and you can group words, vocabulary words, They could be synonyms. They could be, if I'm doing classification in biology, I might have kingdom, phylum, class, order, genus, species, like that. Or if I'm doing forces or something like that. So let me show you this video and I'll give you like a quick overview and there we go. And explanation and a demonstration of how this works. Okay. So just give me a thumbs up if this sounds good. Okay. Guys got sound?
There are lots of ways that teachers can approach teaching vocabulary. I have new vocabulary cards because in every unit, I will give them conceptual vocabulary words. All right, so I'm going to send these around. Take one that you want. And I've discovered that in order for students to really engage in the literacy around a concept, in order to write about it, talk about it, read about it, they have to have language about it. This particular strategy is taking paint chips and taking the vocabulary word and putting it on one shade of the paint color, and then putting different versions of the word, and then finally synonyms of the word on that paint chip. Okay, so those are coming around. Every time they use that word or any of the words on that paint chip during class, they have a little sticker and they get to post it on the wall on their way out. I want to read them and I want you to say them back to me, because I am afraid that if you get a word that you don't know how to pronounce, that you're going to be a little self-conscious. And even though you think you might want to use the word, you might not raise your hand and do it. All right, so here we go. Juxtaposition. Juxtaposition. Dichotomy. Dichotomy. And two of my classes this semester are having a little competition with each other to see who can fill up their white poster the fastest. Bragging rights. They win bragging rights. I mean, I think that the correct teacher response, of course, would be that they win a more robust vocabulary.
Yay, more robust vocabulary. Okay, so I want to show you something too, because this is kind of, it's sticking in my craw lately. I just want to show this to you real quick. Okay, so notice on her list, like where she, like she's got her list going. Hang on a second.
Juxtaposition. Juxtaposition.
There we go. Okay, so you notice that she's got her list there, and I'm seeing a lot of this lately, and that's why I have to bring it up. I know that Microsoft Word, when you make a list, it'll automatically capitalize everything on the list, but we've got to go back and put it in lowercase, because I keep seeing these vocabulary lists in classrooms where everything's capitalized. And I'm like, okay, so the ELA teacher just finished a whole thing on proper nouns, okay? And common nouns. And I'm in social studies class, and you just gave them a vocabulary list where everything is capitalized, and you just negated everything that teacher just did. So we have to make sure that we're capitalizing correctly. And I'm just pointing that out because I see it so often. I would say I see it more often than not. And so just that. So what do you guys think of that strategy? It's time to go like storm Lowe's and Home Depot and get some paint chips, right? I've done that more than once, where I just go and rate it. And it seems like half the time I get busted. And then as soon as I just say, oh, I'm a teacher, they're like, oh, well, here, take as many as you want. So.
I know I found as a special ed teacher, I keep trying to find ways to help kids memorize words with definitions and what they mean. And like we do doodling and drawing pictures and putting words in pictures and like trying to connect words with parts of the definition and things like that to try and give some kind of connection. But I love that paint chip thing and finding synonyms for it. Because that's kind of like the next level then they'll get at with the next grade. They do a lot more synonyms, antonyms, and digging deeper into knowing more than just word and definition. So I like that next step, and excited to talk to the LA teacher about that.
Yeah, and then you could just, when the kids come in, you could have them at different table groups, the paint chips, go through them. And then, every time they're using the word like within context and part of academic discourse, boom, just give them a little dot. I love the fact that it's not a pizza party or candy either. So, and yeah, and it's just the pride of that. I've also seen teachers use those with Greek and Latin roots as well. So, if it's something like sub, it could be subtext, subterranean, submersive, or something like that. And they do it that way just to get kids used to it. But you notice, she's not handing out a list of 30 words with 30 definitions. It's like, here's some words, and we're just going to play with these words and use them in our dialect, in our academic discourse. So any other thoughts of that or questions about the paint chips?
The colors of them might actually help them remember things too. If you can plan far enough ahead that you could have different colors for different things, for different categories, that would probably be effective too.
Yep. Yeah. And there's one teacher I know, what she did was she started putting pictures with them. And she just went onto Google Images, and if she found something, she just put a picture on there. It's kind of hard with something like, I see her with the paint chip where she's got dichotomy or something. I don't know, with something like that. But that's also helpful too, like some kind of visualization. But again, it's that messing with words, playing with vocabulary. That's what sticks. Other thoughts on paint chips? And again, it's an easy to implement, high yield kind of strategy. Okay. All right. There she goes. She's such a happy lady. Okay. Then here's another one too. Vocabulary bookmarks are very helpful. So I'm thinking too, when you're going into content and I'm coming across words I may not know, I can just simply write it in there. Definition, what page it was on, or maybe the sentence that it was on, and refer back to it. Because when we acquire new vocabulary, we may not remember right away what that definition is or what that meaning is. And by going back and having that repetition and having it readily available helps to solidify that. So anything, like that, some kind of bookmark or some kind of vocabulary notebook where they can reference it is really cool. I know some teachers who have like interactive notebooks and vocabulary as part of it. And one of the teachers, he was saying that the kids really like it. It's the first time he's done it. And they're amazed at how many words that they already know, just from that, because it just keeps adding and adding and adding. And he's just like, the more words you're adding, the more vocabulary, the smarter you get, one word at a time. So, and just keep trudging up there. This one is list group label. It's also can be concept sort as well. And basically you take a text and it's before you read it. So going through the words, going through the text, and then the top part is just like write down any words that are new or that you may know, that are familiar, that you think other people should know, and then categorize them. And it's a cold categorization. We don't give them the categories ahead of time. And it's one of those things too, like just, like, oh, well, how are the kids going to do with that? And the way that our brains work and the way that language works is that we naturally kind of categorize things, especially with language. And so, I don't have the large one there, but basically what kids will do is they'll start giving them categories and they'll group them, and then have them give them a label. And I actually, I'll send it to you guys, or I'll put it up on our website. But I have one from American history, and they're going into the beginning of the American Revolution. And the kids know, and this is where proper nouns and common nouns help too, is all the proper nouns, they know that those are locations. So like Boston and Virginia and things like that, they know right away that those are locations. And then they figured out like the titles of documents, like the Declaration of Independence, Articles of Confederation. So we kind of naturally do that. And then they go into the text and actually read it. So what it does is that it previews the vocabulary. It builds some background knowledge that they may not have otherwise. And then after they read it, maybe go back and say, would you move anything around, and why would you move it? Or would you change your categories, or would you add something? So that's a very cool way to reflect on what they've learned, and help solidify and like practice with that new knowledge as well. So list group label is very handy. It's also goes under the
sometimes it's referred to as a concept sort too. I've seen that around as well. It's the same thing. All right. Word walls. Anybody ever use a word wall? Anybody ever do that? Okay. They kind of fallen out of favor, and like, you know, we got to bring them back into fashion. Okay. And because they're great strategies. And this is actually from a 6th grade teacher in New Mexico. She's a biology teacher, and you can see that what she did was that she added lots of visuals to hers. And so every single one of the words and the definition, there's an example, and then there's also a picture as well. So and then that 6-step vocabulary process, that's from Marzano, and that was adopted by her district. So she just kind of emphasized that as well. So I think somebody's got their mic on and might be driving. I don't know. Okay. All right. There it goes. Sound's gone, but I was getting some background noise. All right. This Sarah Russler Wright is just a fabulous human being. I'm not just saying that because she's a fabulous human being, but also she has really good stuff. She does a blog for Sadlier Publishing, Vocab Gal, and she's a high school teacher and a librarian. And if you go to that site, they have gobs and gobs and gobs of really good materials that that you can use right away. So I want to share with you briefly before we go on break some of the things that she has on there. Give me 1 second because I'm going to pull that up. If I can't get my hands on it right away, I'm just going to say, let's take our break right now. Let's see. Loading. I've got the pinwheel of death. Loading. Okay, here we go. And I put this up online as well for you guys on our site. So it's there. I took a vocabulary, like their big back to school one that they had for 6th through 12th grade. It's really good. And let's see, I'm all about free stuff. Yeah, of course I can't find it right away. Where I thought I put it, it's not there. So I'll dig for it while we're on break. So let's do this. Let's take a 5-minute stretch and then come back. Okay. And when we come back, we're probably going to go for about another 40 minutes, just so you know, for timing. And we'll probably be wrapping it up today, probably closer to about 4:45. Is that good? I know nobody's going to complain about that. Okay. All right. I'll see you back in 5 minutes. I'm going to put a timer up. Okay. Okay, we're coming back. We're back. And then I found what I was looking for. So I put it on our webpage, and whoops. Oh, come here. Hang on, wrong thing. Let me try that again. Oh. I don't know. Ever since I installed an update, it's doing like wonky things. All right. So this is what I put up there for you guys. So it's their vocabulary back to school kit. And just some like general overview. I love this, like other ways to say went, other ways to say good, or said. That's like another one too, like said. So this one I thought was pretty cool. I was going to try it out in a classroom that I'm going to be in next week. And so you cut out the template that they have here, and it's horizontal, so they're almost like little bookmarks. And basically what you do with it is that a student starts at the top. So you put started by, and I put Katie, and I give an adjective. So if I say like joyous, all right, is the adjective. Then I fold it over, and then that goes to the next one. And then the student now has the slip, and they put a like a favorite vocabulary noun, and they keep doing that. So you can't like peek at previous words. So the word has to be new. They can't use the same adjective on two different sheets. And after the last round, you pass the slips back to the original creator, have them turn the words into a sentence by filling in modifiers and conjunctions. So it's almost like a Mad Libs kind of thing. So you just, so you have, like, I have joyous, and then I turn it over and I pass it to Kelsey, and she puts potato is the next one, and then verb. And then the student has to use all of those vocabulary or all those words into a text. And then let's see that one. Let me show you this other one that I thought was good. This is very similar to what I've talked about. This is a bit more in depth and elaborate. So here's the word. I've never seen this word. It looks familiar, but I can't explain it. And then I think I know this word, and it's used in this way in a sentence. And I'm sure I know this word, and that's how I use it this way in a sentence. So it's using it multiple times to demonstrate their understanding of it. So, and that happens to me all the time. Like, we'll come across a word like yesterday, I said inadequacies. What does inadequacies mean? And they're like, well, I know what it means, but I don't know if I could explain it. And I said, well, do you know what adequate means, if something's adequate? And if they get stuck on that, I give them an example. And Kim Kardashian feels that her mansion and all of her clothes are adequate for her needs. So what do you think that means? And then in is opposite, so inadequate. And so this works really, really well. Here's another example of it. Capitalizing the vocabulary words. Wow. I'm gonna go nuts on that. Don't look at that. Don't look at that. Those are capitalized. Okay. And then same thing down here, like scrutinize, and it's capitalized. It's not a proper noun. And then examine closely, scrutinize, example sentence, and then a mnemonic. So anytime they can do a visual and hook it with that vocabulary word, that's really helpful, or something from their context. As soon as I started giving an example from Kim Kardashian, they started laughing. And then vocabulary ladder is really nice too. Using this word and then a synonym for it. And then here is something using both of them. So, Kim Kardashian's mansion is adequate and meets her needs. So meets and adequate would be synonymous. So there we go. And then this is very similar to the bookmarks that I gave you too, but this is kind of an even fancier version that you can lift here. And I thought this was interesting too, is weekly vocabulary assessment, the last 5 minutes of class on a Friday of handing those out, and give me a word that you learned this week and a sentence with it. Show me what you know. Time to brag. Okay. All right. So there's that. And I just put it on our website, so it's available to you guys there. Okay. So moving on here. I want to go over centers again and center structure and planning. And, you know, we're going to do some reminders. And then what I'm going to ask is anybody who, you know, whatever you're working on this week, whatever you're teaching or coming up, let's just plan together. And I want to show you how you could develop centers from what you're teaching. And plan that. So just a reminder too, at the centers, you know, we usually follow that mini lesson, and then there's some kind of guided practice, and then the center activities. So as I showed you before, like with the sticky notes, and so we have the sticky notes, and then I demonstrate that. Wait, hang on one second. Make sure you guys, did you guys see that? I wasn't sure if you guys saw that. You guys seeing the screen? I'm telling you, ever since I did that Zoom application, it's doing like really kind of freakish things to me. There we go. Okay. So, so that mini lesson, I do the sticky notes and I demonstrate it, and then the kids can go into guided practice. And then when I do the centers, hang on a second. When I do the centers, that could be one of the centers as well. So I might have my teacher-led center, then do sticky notes, reading together. Kids may be working on vocabulary, writing center. For that new program that you have in physics, where a lot of it is online, maybe the kids are looking at animations, demonstrations online. I don't know. That could be a center too. That's more content specific. So and just remember that they always work in those small groups, and that each center has that clearly articulated targeted activity. And that's, you know, and they should be able to do that activity with largely with independence and working with their peers. Okay. And just reminders too about group size, 3 to 5 kids in a group. We give them choice when we can. And then timing is generally around like 12, 15 minutes most at this grade level. And that there's always an opportunity to finish anything up that they didn't complete at a center possibly. And then those written procedures and directions too. Okay. All right. So let's do this if we can. What I'd like to do is anybody can volunteer. And what are you teaching like in the next couple of weeks between now and when winter break starts? And why don't we just develop a center rotation from that? So who was telling me that they're doing centers? Kelly, you were saying that they're kind of cooking right now, aren't they, in your school? Oh, you're on mute. The meme of 2020. You're on mute. I just asked you to unmute. Did it show? Oh, I'm not hearing you. Hang on a second. Nope, I should be able to hear you. I've got it on the right speakers. Yeah. It is so weird. Okay. Okay. Just put it in the chat if you can. Type it in the chat. Or anybody. Yeah, I know you guys can hear her. There's something going on my end because I got like a warning thing about it. I'll go one more place. Telling you, ever since I never do the updates. I did that. Let me go into sound real quick. Yeah, all my settings are right. This is bizarre. Okay. Let me try this real quick, and then I'm going to put my headset back on and see if it works that way. Okay, I think I got you now. Are you there?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can get you now. I don't know why. So now it's
Okay.
working on my headset. Okay. So your teachers are kind of cooking right now in the centers.
Well, 8th grade is, which I'm not normally in that class.
Yeah.
And I feel like the in the English teachers class with her title support, they're doing um they're doing some writing on different like, like informative what's your opinion writing,
Mm-hmm.
and I feel like they're kind of on the same page, whereas in the global studies room, um the global studies teacher is doing like just readings that are coming up, and his title one support, she's doing vocabulary, so like pre-teaching the vocabulary going on. So I'm not sure if it's like all totally connected everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we're kind of working that out. Like today, before I left, we did a group jam in 6th grade on IXL. It was terrible. We were all talking. The kids were, we were like, all the teachers were looking at each other across the room, like, yeah, we're not going to do this again. But I like that, like our 6th grade teachers talking about text structure
Mm-hmm.
and using like headings and captions and things like that. And I feel like we could develop something really good for how do we quickly skim for something, but then also say that sometimes you do need to read everything too. You know what I mean? To try to find
Right.
that
Right.
balance.
So knowing like when you should skim or when you need to do like a close deep read, right?
Yeah,
Um,
because I think what was happening today in the group jam,
mm-hmm.
some kids were skimming and the smart ones were getting it right away and they were saying the answer. I'm like, well, we really should be reading the whole thing, but they were just using the concepts they had learned in their core class.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. Gotcha. Okay. All
Hey,
right.
Katie.
Yeah.
Oh, you can hear me. Yay.
Yeah, I
Okay.
got you now. Yeah.
Was the original question, I'm sorry, we got a lot going on with technology right now. The original question was, does somebody want to volunteer to
Mm-hmm.
get something planned? We're going to do it together.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So if you don't have a volunteer, because I couldn't quite hear there for a little bit, our middle school science teacher's with us and she would love to get something planned for the week.
Okay. All right.
And she's working on natural resources right now.
Natural resources. Okay. So tell us more about natural resources. I know we've got several science teachers here, so they probably know better than us, but all of us ELA and social studies people, fill us in more. And then what is the standard? Like what's the skill? Give us the skill, give us
To
the content.
understand like how human impacts the natural resources and depletion of them and the distribution of them.
Okay. So understand human impact on natural resources.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
that's
So
the
I'm going to
main,
share my
that's
screen.
the, I
Hang on one
can
sec.
see.
Yep.
Oh, wait,
Okay. And so what else are you like going to be digging into specifically? So what natural resources are we looking at? Are we looking at water? Are we looking at air? What are we looking at?
Fossil fuels, groundwater, minerals, and soil actually too.
Groundwater, soil, and what was the other?
Oh, minerals. Thank you.
Minerals. Okay.
Fossil. Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So let's go to this first, okay? So let's get an essential question, because remember that those big essential questions give kids purpose, right? So let's everybody, let's ruminate on this, the whole team here.
We already have.
And how can we put this into a good essential question? So, you can go ahead and put that in the chat if you have an idea. I've got an idea as well.
Well, on the natural resources in your area. Okay. Oh, am I sweating?
Yeah, somebody's got their mic on. There's a lot of background noise. Something like oh, here's an idea. So let me ask you this. So impact, it can be either positive or negative, right?
Yeah, it's
Far as
actually
resources.
both. We're
Mhm.
yeah, it's both on this part.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So I'm going to put something in the chat, okay?
Would an essential question be like, how green is green energy?
Ooh, oh, I like that. Yeah. And then how green is green energy? Nice. I have like how are natural resources impacted, influenced by humans. I really like how green is green energy because it's very middle school friendly, right? And it's really written where kids could explore that. Okay, so let's start with a good essential question. Are you guys okay if I take that second one, that how green is green energy, and we just use that as a placeholder right now? Are you okay with that?
Could what were some of the other options? I don't know if that's fitting for my section per se.
Okay, so is that other one right now, is that a better placeholder? How are natural resources impacted, influenced by humans?
Yeah, because I think the one I actually created yesterday was like, why are some areas more rich in resources while others have so few?
Oh, that's great. So wait, all right, so tell me that one again, read that again.
Why are some areas rich in resources while others have so few?
Wow, and we can get into all the social economics and things on that too, right? Okay, so what kinds of science specific skills are we working on?
Like,
Standards. Yeah. What do you want kids to be able to do at the end of this?
well,
Are they
to be able to understand where some of these resources are found and how they're formed and why they're formed in certain areas, and then why we have depletion in certain areas also. So understanding the resource itself, how it's forming in certain areas and why we have it in certain areas and don't, and then why we're showing some of it depleting faster than others and what causes that.
Okay. So I want to point something out here. This, okay, yeah, they've got to know all of this, right? In order to answer this big question, right? So what kind of skill might be more associated with that, of being able to answer that question?
So you mean like, because I have them create their own claim
Mm-hmm.
for the entire lesson, and then we have to go through different activities and find evidence that will either support or doesn't support their claim. And then if we get to the end of the lesson for the week, if their evidence doesn't support their claim, they have to revise their claim to fit to answer that essential question.
Beautiful. Okay. Yeah. Develop a well-reasoned claim, okay, with relevant and I want to say connected, but that's not what I want to say. Relevant and well-resourced evidence. Okay, so that's the literacy skill. What about, that's in writing, anything that they have to be able to develop in reading?
Like, you mean I have them read certain articles that involve, like, that relate to our textbook itself, if that's what you're referring to.
Okay, but what do they have to, what skill do you want them to develop in order to understand those articles, to develop like deep comprehension in this science content?
Like the literacy skill in science is probably identifying the central idea and grade level text that we have.
Yeah, I heard that, identifying central
Oh,
idea
yeah.
and grade
Oh,
level text, right?
yep.
But it's more than just identifying the central idea, because if I say this, the central idea of this is different kinds of rocks, is that going to
Mhm.
help me answer that essential question?
No.
Right. So it's beyond that, right? So
Right.
so I love what you did. Who am I talking to? Who, because I know it says West Central, but I know your name's not West Central. So
Oh, it's Sarah.
hi, Sarah. Okay. So
Hi.
so the fact that the kids have to pick either one side or the other, and have a well-developed claim, and that's the lens through which they're looking at this content and exploring it. So they're trying to find evidence to support their argument. So
Mm-hmm.
when they're reading that text, they're basically learning how to like process information, identifying relevant information to support a claim from that text. That's what they're
Mm-hmm.
really doing. And
Yeah.
and so it's not just, and they're going to have lots of evidence. They'll probably have evidence in each one of these texts that could support either argument, is what I'm guessing, right? But they
Yeah.
have to
Yes.
be able to distinguish and discern which evidence is relevant and most critical in support of their argument. And here's the difference. I'm glad you asked that question. The difference is this, is that if I just identify the central idea, that's more on a like a literal level. Okay, I know what the topic is, but what you're actually doing is foisting them into more of an evaluative stance. And as we discussed at the beginning of our session today, that's where we want to be, because that's where comprehension gets sticky. That's where learning gets sticky. So I'm sure there's an Indiana reading standard that goes along the lines of this. Bless you. Identify and discern um, uh, um, uh, the, it's not the difference. What about just say identify um, relevant textual evidence to support a well-reasoned claim, not spooned, reasoned claim. Okay. And then I'll put
Mm-hmm.
this up on our website too. Okay. So everybody will have it. So if you're worried about like, scrambling to take notes, don't worry about it. Okay. So this is what we're going to do. So our mini lesson, what do you need to introduce first? What do the kids need to know first?
Well, they have to understand what resources we have.
Okay. And so like the natural resources, right?
Yeah, because they're seventh grade. So although they should have learned that last year, a lot of them sometimes forget.
Yeah, that's just part of adolescence. So we're going to introduce different resources. And how do you usually do that, Sarah?
So I do like a vocab day where we have different vocab activities. One of them is to like draw a picture that relates this word,
Mm-hmm.
what the word actually means, what are some of the words that are similar to it, and then using that word in a sentence. That's
Mm-hmm.
one of the activities. Another one is an actual vocab sheet that uses it in different texts, I would say, like not just in science.
Mm-hmm. 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 Okay. So like previewing, front loading the vocabulary. What
Yeah, because
else do you?
I
Mm-hmm.
figured if they don't understand the words, then they're not going to understand what I'm talking about all week.
Yeah. And vocabulary in science, as we all know, is critical, right? So what you could do is you're going to model like what you want the kids to do. So I'm going to introduce one term and exactly what you just said. I'm going to model for you, synonyms that I have, pictures of it where I can get pictures of it and draw a picture of it and then using it in a sentence. So we want to model the expectation for learning the vocabulary, right? So it's almost like a Frere slide that you're doing, like a Frere model for vocabulary. For the vocabulary analysis is what they're doing. Okay. And do you want them to start reading? How many kids are in the class too, by the way?
I think my largest one's like 25 and my smallest is like 14.
Okay. All right. So, okay, so we're gonna that's gonna be your mini lesson. You're gonna show kids how to do that vocabulary analysis. Okay. Now we might change this. And then what you could do is you could have a guided practice where you give them a group of words or whatever, and they could pick one and they do one on their own. Notice that whenever you start typing in front of other people, you make all kinds of typos. And do the same thing. Okay, and then let's start figuring out what our centers are going to be. So one of them is obviously going to be vocabulary because they need to know more words, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so you could give them assigned words or have them skim whatever you think that you need to do. I would say to complete that kind of Frere model that you're looking at, I might give them something like, here are like 7 words, pick 5, okay, and complete. So they're going to be doing the same thing that you modeled for them in the mini lesson, and that might be like a 5 to 7 minute mini lesson. Then they're going to practice it with guided practice where you're kind of looking around and watching them while they're in pairs and doing this. And then they're going to do it again in their vocabulary center. Okay. And so you're going to give 5 words from, like 7 to 8 on list. Okay, and complete. Do they have to do some reading, right?
Yeah.
So we have a reading center. Is this from the text or is this is this something that you're giving them like different resources outside of the text?
I've done both. It depends on what we're covering. I'm assuming probably with this one I could maybe find an article that covers a lot of these terms that they don't understand.
Say that again. It kind of cut out there for a second. Say that again.
I said I've used both, like using the text or an article, but I mean, either way, I think both would be okay.
Okay, so decide which hill you're going to die on. Are you giving them different texts or are they going to be reading something from the textbook?
I'll probably give them the textbook.
Okay, and then when they get some kind of reading, do you have a protocol for them? Or is there, a text like, similar to sticky notes, like question, comment, connection? What are you usually doing there?
My textbook is set up to where it does like a small section, and then we look at either like a graph, a diagram, or a picture that deals with the text that we just talked about, and then we answer questions about the text. That's kind of how the textbook
Okay,
is. Yeah,
let me hold on to that. I don't know if you noticed in the chat, but your colleagues are chiming in too. Like this is like the fun part about creating curriculum. It's like it's a wonderful creative process. So so a suggestion was made. Roxanne made a suggestion where she said, maybe some mapping where the resources are located to discover what makes them plentiful in certain areas. So like almost like an inquiry kind of thing. And do you have materials that might be able to do that?
Yeah, yeah, I have materials that can do that.
Okay, so so specifically, where are the resources located? Plentiful in certain areas. Okay. Yeah, and that might be something too, like what do you notice? And here's the location, here's the context, what grows here, what assumptions can you make? What evidence do you have about about those areas. Okay. All right. What else do you generally need to accomplish?
Well, I know like we do like mini labs typically with each like lesson or whatever.
Okay, hold on to that with the mini lab because I got an idea for that I've seen other science teachers do. One of the things that we could do going back to the reading from the text, if it's a routine that they're familiar with, with looking at the text and answering questions, they can do like one chunk at center 2 and then they can do another chunk in center 4. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Okay, so we can do like text chunk 1 and then text chunk 2, okay? And then you had 25 kids, so we need 5 centers probably, because you want about 5 kids at a center. That's your largest class, and we'll talk about your 14, what you're going to do on that. We'll talk about that in a second. So we've got vocabulary analysis, mapping, reading. Would a video about different resources and building some more background knowledge be helpful?
Yes, I like to use videos for.
Okay, so one is a video center. Okay, how long are your class periods?
50 minutes.
50 minutes. Okay, you're not going to get through all this in one day, so this will be
Nope.
2 days. So on that first day, you'll probably get through the mini lesson, the guided practice, and one center. Is 50 minutes. Okay. And so is video, right?
Yeah.
And give them something to do at that video. One of my favorite things to do is a simple T chart of ask something, say something. So a question I have, that's the ask something. And then the say something is an aha or an observation that you have. And it's just a 2-column organizer, ask something, say something. And that works really well. Now, with these 2 items here, these chunks here and all of it, again, they have that lens that you're going to be setting up for them, that they need to keep finding evidence that's going to support their claim. So they can be using the reading centers, they can use, the text that they're reading, what they're going to be watching in that video center, and also that mapping. So these are the different activities that you have. Now, when you have mini labs, this is what a lot of science teachers do. And then on this one, since it's your first time out, I'm not suggesting a teacher-led center at this point. But when you start going into subsequent days, what you might want to do, since the kids have to decide which side of the claim they're going to support, is make your teacher-led center where you focus on that essential question and ask the kids, what did you find that supports that? And keep talking to them about it and emphasizing it, and perhaps even giving them a graphic organizer like source 1, source 2, source 3, source 4 to support their argument. So they're using that while they go through the centers and can keep track of that. And that's a nice little formative assessment for you too, that as the kids are progressing through the content and progressing through the centers, you can go back to that sheet and see like what they're accumulating as far as their growing corpus of evidence. Okay.
So if you have
Awesome.
that,
Sounds great. Oh.
Okay. Somebody's chiming in, I think. Yeah.
that's all right.
Yeah, go ahead.
So if you have that as one of your teacher stations, what do you do early in that if they haven't really gone through the other stations yet? How you could ask them, what have you found so far? But
yeah, well, that teacher-led center could be anything. I can use it for evaluating work. Kids that may have difficulty with reading in that content area, reading, science text it can be very challenging. I would bring them to my teacher-led center first and make sure that they are feeling confident about the reading. So I might do one of those readings and get them started on it, and make sure that they are understanding it. I could be introducing another concept to them. If as a science teacher, those mini labs that you're talking about, I've seen teachers do this all the time. They're usually like about 15 minutes. Those mini labs is that the teacher-led center is the mini lab, and it's a longer center. It's like a double one, so I could split the kids in half, especially in a 50-minute class period. I did my mini lesson, and so I have the kids with me for like 15 minutes, and then the other kids are circulating with maybe the reading and the vocabulary. Then they flip, and then I have a larger group of kids on my teacher-led center, and they do the lab with me. So I'm going to be doing that mini lab like more than once. And I realize that prep sometimes in science and materials that may not be conducive to that. But if that's, I've seen lots of science teachers do that, or especially in middle school in like 6th grade, where kids need more supervision to like set up labs and get understanding how to use lab equipment, that works well for them. And then Roxanne also suggested too, like maybe give a article on the same topic, but different views, and they could debate. Yeah, and it is a big standard. So one of the things that comes up in New Mexico, when I worked in a district there before the pandemic, the town I was working in was an oil and gas town, and there were some serious issues with fracking. This was about like 7 years ago, and there's some who argue like this is a way to get the energy, this process, but at what cost as far as the environmental costs. And a lot of the kids in that community, their families are working in the oil and gas industry, so it's not just an environmental concern, but it's also a economic consideration as well. So Sarah, what questions do you have so far about this?
None that I can think of off the top of my head, at least at this moment.
Yeah. Okay. And let me just emphasize too, start small. Start small and grow. So we're not doing a teacher-led center the first time around. Maybe after a couple of rounds and the kids are in routines, then maybe start picking up that teacher-led center. But that teacher-led center, I can give descriptive feedback to students about their writing. I can work with kids on a specific skill. I can deep dive into content. Kids, not struggling learners, but kids, or striving learners, but kids who are mastering the material very quickly. How do I push them to go further? And that teacher-led center is also an opportunity for that as well. Okay. All right.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. So we're at like the 45-minute mark right now. And what I'd like you to do is this. I want to ask you two things. So, and you can just put it in the chat. So the first question is, what are you thinking about? Like, what did you learn since we started an hour and 45 minutes ago? And what would you like more of in our February session? So I'd like that feedback. So if you could take like 2 minutes and do that, and just put it in the chat area. What have you learned so far? And then the second question is, what would you like more material on for our February session? And I'm going to put this, what we just created, I'm going to put it in the chat as well, so you can download it right away, so you don't have to wait for me to post it on our website. Yeah, that paint. Yeah, so Kelly, when you do that, I'd love to see how that went. Um, oh, great, Christina, you got some planning done. Yay! Okay. So more vocabulary. We want more vocabulary. Okay. Um, Yeah, Roxanne, that's the other thing too. Like, even though we did a science one, I'm sure those of you who don't teach science started thinking of like different ways that you could do things, and keep thinking about that repackaging. So do we want to add just like more like planning time next time? Like, the last half hour we just kind of plan together and yep. Okay. Yeah, I'm actually, Kelly, I'm doing graphic organizers for Wabash Valley. It's in the spring. So if you look on their website, I'm doing a session, and it's going to be on Zoom. It'll be one on elementary, and then the other one's going to be 6-12. So, and that's all we're going to do is graphic organizers for 3 hours. Um, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and again with the centers too, just start off with like once a week, or once every 2 weeks, but we do need to kind of regularly do them so the kids build those habits. Okay. Mm-hmm. More on essential questions. Yep. Okay. And English language learners. Yeah, I should talk to Tammy about just doing like a separate like English language learners, like 7 things that you can do as a content area teacher to support multilingual learners. Um, yep. Okay. Awesome. Okay, so more ideas for centers, especially in the different subject areas. Okay, yeah. So okay, so let's so next time I'll remind you all because it's like seems so far away. It's 2 months away. But in February, let's all come prepared, like show and tell first of all, some of the things that we've been doing. So if you try out like paint chips or you have your own spin on it or anything that you've done in centers, we learned so much from each other. And I'll share, some things that I've done too in classrooms. I actually have some prep work that I have to do. I'm doing like 3 mini lessons next week in a middle school. So I'm prepping that and let's share, what we're learning and how we're applying it into our practice. And then I'll make sure I'll give you like more vocabulary, more strategies. Doug Fisher and Nancy Fry just published a book, the Vocabulary Playbook. I haven't looked at it yet. I've got it. It came from Amazon. I haven't had a chance to crack it, but you might want to take a look at that as a resource. And uh, so we'll get more vocabulary strategies as well, and then make sure that we have a good chunk of time for like center planning as well. Okay, how's that sound? Thumbs up, thumbs down. Okay, all right, and you guys know where to get a hold of me too as well. So I did put what we had just created. It's in the chat right now, so you can download it from there, and then I'll also put it on our website as well, so it'll also be posted there. Okay, all right, so in the meantime, have a great winter break. I know we're getting down to the home stretch before winter break, and I hope you take some time, like the first day that you're home, that you don't set the alarm and just catch up on some sleep and really take some time for yourself. And then I will see you after break, but you guys know that I'm always available to you. Just email me, and I'm more than happy to hop on a Zoom and talk things out if you want to try out centers and want some planning, and sit down kind of like we did today. I'm more than happy to do that. And as always, thank you for everything that you do every day on behalf of kids. So it's just a joy to work with all of you. See you later.